What is up, everybody? This is Voth, and in this video I'm going to discuss some of the options that are available to you after you successfully conquer a settlement. Now, I have touched on these various options superficially in the Let's Plays, but I figured a more in-depth discussion would be good. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is continue the siege so that I can look at the settlement, click right here, gather information, and this will allow me to see what their buildings are. Now, depending on their buildings, it sort of helps you decide which option is best for you. But we'll get into that more later when we actually are discussing them. So let's go ahead and attack this settlement. I'm going to auto-calc it to expedite this whole demonstration. I could probably fight the battle and get much better results than that, but I just wanted to touch on them. Alright, we have Subjugate, Sack, Subjugate, Loot and Occupy, and Raze, and then obviously there's the Liberate option. First up, we're going to discuss sacking. Now, sacking is a good way to extract income from a settlement without actually capturing it. If you don't feel like you can hang on to a settlement and properly defend it, or if you're not ready to exit horde mode, sacking is a great way to extract income from a province without owning it. Now, there's a sharp diminishing return on how much money you'll get out of it, so sacking the same province over and over and over for the purposes of getting money is not a good idea. The AI won't generally repair it. If you're in a head-to-head game with someone, they definitely won't repair it because they know you're just going to sack it again. However, sacking the same settlement and not getting a lot of gold out of it still has uses. As long as the settlement has any troops in it, meaning you've waited at least one turn for the troops to repopulate, you'll get XP for your general. So you can attack, bounce back and forth between two settlements every turn, and level your general up pretty quickly. It's not going to be super fast because they aren't hard battles, but it's XP nonetheless. Now, the second use of sacking the same settlements, even though you're not getting good income out of them, is for what I call diplomatic currency. That's your general rapport that you have with other factions. For instance, right here I've sacked a Germanic settlement, so the Germanic tribes are not going to like me for that. However, if I was to just come right down here and sack a Roman settlement, I could sack that every turn, and all the Germanic tribes within 5 or 6 turns would love me, and I could easily establish an alliance network with them. So sacking is really good for the money you can extract, the diplomatic currency that you can extract, and the XP that you can extract from it. So that is why we sack. Alright, the next thing we're going to discuss is the Subjugate option. Now, Subjugate is sort of a touchy subject because, if you don't properly maintain them, they can easily rebel against you. If they have the wrong traits, like if they get rebellious, they'll definitely rebel against you. If you find someone with loyal and you're lucky, you can sort of maintain them for a while, but inevitably, their ruler's going to die and they might be replaced by someone who will rebel against you. I kind of think of Subjugate in sort of like a role-play sense. If you're trying to be true to history and have lots of puppet states, for whatever reason you want to have puppet states, you have to accept up front that it's going to be more challenging for you. You're going to be putting down rebellions. You're going to have people attacking your puppet states and so on and so forth. So it's up to you. Now, the actual uses in the game, the biggest reason to subjugate is if you've got someone whittled down to one province and they have a large army threatening like your capital city, and you don't want to take the chances of them raising it. If you occupy the city, they would go into horde mode, or if they're a non-barbarian, they would just be in like free move mode, whatever you want to call it, and they would likely attack one of your other settlements, so you're just going to have the same problem somewhere else. So if you subjugate them, that's a way of forcing a peace right then and there. They will not attack you again. They're on your side, and for at least several turns, you're in control of them. So this is the best reason to subjugate outside of roleplay purposes. Alright, up next on the list is looting and occupying. Now this is where that foreknowledge of the city from gather information becomes useful. I know that this has a tier 2 sanitation building and an artisan. And I also know that we're the same culture, so I can build them up. So looting and occupying in this case is generally not a good idea. Now, if you're looting and occupying another, culture, and you know that you can't in any way build up their buildings, they're just going to be dead ducks until you demolish them, that's a good idea to loot and occupy, because then you hit loot and occupy, you go in, let's say this was a Roman settlement and I can't build these up. I could just demolish them and I would get the money from looting and occupying, and then I could demolish and not have to worry about the repair cost. Now obviously I'd still have to repair the city before I could convert it, so it really you have to know basically how much money you're going to loot. If this place had a tier 2 and a tier 1 building, so I didn't get a lot from looting and occupying. However, if it had been a full province with several buildings at tier 2 and tier 3, I could get well over 10k income. So I could take it and then just start demolishing everything so I could rebuild it to my standards. The next main use of looting and occupying is if you're on a campaign and you're already an established country and you're on a campaign and you're in enemy territory sacking stuff, and your army's lost some units and you need to replan. If you loot and occupy, you'll still get the money that you'd get from sacking, but then you could sit there for a turn or two and replan your troops without having to go all the way back to your homeland. And then you could just abandon the province and it'll either fall to rebels or the other faction will recapture it, but no skin off your nose. You got money out of it and you've moved on. Just be careful when looting and occupying. If your food is low, you're potentially going to cause yourself to starve. So make sure you have a good buffer zone of food before you loot and occupy. Alright, the next option on the list is the standard occupy. Now, in the case that you're the same culture, you approve of the buildings that they have built, occupying is generally the best way. It gives you that small bonus to your troop replenish. It has less public order issues long term, only -10 instead of -20 as in with loot and occupy. So if you're looking to actually establish a province under your control, occupying is going to get you to a good healthy province the quickest. It's also going to do the least amount of damage to the buildings, so repair costs are going to be lower. It's the nicest way to take over a settlement, really. Now we have that very polarizing option of razing. Razing destroys the particular settlement that you've been attacking. It looks great. I love to raze. I know a lot of people hate it, and they hate the way the AI razes. The main purpose of razing is sort of that scorched earth mentality. The jealous boyfriend of, if I can't have it, no one can. It's just a great way to degrade the land and make everything just really not worth having. The best example that I could think of off the top of my head is when I was playing my Geats campaign. It was my very first campaign. It was around turn 80 or so, and I was looking at the relative power. I was up to second and I wanted to be number 1. So the way I got to number 1 is I found who was number 1. I went into their territory and I just started razing one settlement in every province they had. This drove their food down. This drove their income way down. They started suffering attrition problems, public order problems, rebellions happened, civil wars. They just couldn't keep their land together. And they crumbled and plummeted down the relative power charts, and I became number 1. It's just a really good way to make an empire crumble without having to actually take the land away from them. So if you don't feel like you can hold on to it and you want to be a jerk, raze them. Okay, the last option that isn't represented in this particular example is the liberation. Liberation is really good for hordes early game. Like for instance, let's say you're playing the Ostrogoths. Liberating Irelia or Macedonia can create a safe zone where you can hide in and, you know, recover lost troops or build up this or that. And in general, it's probably I would say kind of a nice version of raising. You take a settlement away from somebody, completely away from them, but instead of destroying it, you just put it in somebody else's hands. You force them into a military alliance, and now you have a friend who's, you know, loves you because you've done a great thing for them. You gave them an entire settlement. In general, it's always a good idea to liberate in almost every case. Obviously, if you're trying to control an entire province, you wouldn't capture 2 of them and then liberate the 3rd one and just create a problem for yourself. So, you know, keep in mind where you're liberating, plan strategically where you're going to liberate. Often I try to liberate a faction in a walled city so that they're not easily conquered, so that they turn into a powerful ally, and that's a great place for them to expand from. So it's the best way to force a military alliance and have a safe place for a horde to hide at. Okay, that is it. If you guys found this video useful, please like and subscribe. Any feedback is great. Any questions, if you feel like I got something wrong, let me know. And I'll see you guys around. Later.